Welcome back to the Chip Lunch Podcast. My name is Joel, and it's wonderful to have you along with us, whether you're watching us on YouTube. Shout out to Greaves, who always puts a comment in there. He's been doing quite a fair bit.
We want Eck for episode 100.
Yeah, 100. We definitely 100%.
Keep commenting.
100% on Eck for episode 100. He's moved away already because he can't hear. Can he hear us? I think he can. Your face is hidden over there. I can't tell what you do now. He walked away. Yes, welcome, Braden. How are you?
Oh, I've already been belittled, and now I'm getting asked on how I'm going.
What this is? Why are you surprised? Why did you bring two drinks onto the podcast?
One's water, and one is got a lot of sugar in it. So that tells you that we're recording in the afternoon again, and not in the morning.
Does that mean it's a Coca-Cola? Is that what it is?
I just didn't want to. Like, if they want us to mention them, they should pay us. So I was leaving it generic.
Yes,
I'm sure. Leaving it open for a sponsorship deal.
We're not sponsoring this podcast. I don't know how many times you have to tell you that.
Brought to you by Coca-Cola.
You are drinking out of the Lionel mug.
Yes, famous Lionel mug, given to me by Greaves. Though it's a left-handed mug.
I believe his wife, Ange, got those made.
Greaves' wife.
Yes, Greaves' wife.
According to Eli.
Greaves' wife. Let's introduce our guests.
Yes.
We usually have guests on the Chip Lunch podcast. We had two last week, which was exciting.
Yeah.
But on this one, we only have one. Yeah. But you need to be on your best behaviour there, Braden, because we have one of the wardens of Sorrelville Church, Leonie. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming on. As I was just saying to you before, we had a little bit of trouble getting a guest this week. And last night I texted you at 10:15 and you replied. I was not expecting you to reply. And you're like, yep, no worries. I can do it either this time. I'm like, fantastic. Thank you so much. So thank you very much for joining us. But as I was at pains to tell you, you were not... whatever choice it was just working through a list. That's all. There's not a priority in there.
Just happy to help.
Oh, I appreciate it very much. And a very, very lovely floral...
thank you.
What do we call it? Attire? So thank you for brightening up this landscape, which is really today green. The same colour. You and me. Same colour hat. It's pretty much the same colour shirt, and we're both wearing black shorts.
Yeah.
Yeah, can't see that on YouTube, but, text me and I'll send you a photo. Right, let's start. It's really lovely to have you on, as I said. Thanks. Leonie. Thank you very much. I just noticed that your watch band also matches your top, so that's even more coordinated.
Happy coincidence.
Thank you. Now, you also have said that you have listened to almost every Chip Lunch episode. Is that all of them, or is there some that you've skipped? Is it all the ones that I'm in?
No, I think it is actually all of them. I'm sorry, it's a bit of a tragic... but
have you listened to the one that's come out today yet?
I have actually. Was it Roger and Sue?
Roger and Sue, yes.
Yeah, and they were amazing.
Yeah.
What an incredible example of commitment to just sharing the gospel and just loving their family. And
I agree.
Yeah.
It was really cool, and to hear about their background, which is very similar to Pete and Bev Crawshaw's, who've been on this podcast as well. So I had an excellent time. Yeah. There was a reason we didn't have Braden on.
I don't know. I don't listen to any of the ones that I'm on. So Leonie has by far listened to more of them than I have.
Yeah. Well, I think you were doing something very important, writing a sermon.
I was writing something last week. So.
That's right. So, Leonie, if you do listen to every podcast, do you know what question I'm about to ask you?
Well, I think you're going to ask me about how I like my hot chips.
Correct. Thank you for doing my job. Yeah. You want to answer that one too?
And I think you'll be happy.
Oh,
yes. So I'm going to even up a little. Oh, yeah, definitely salt. So my kids loved chicken salt. Yes. And no.
You disown them for that?
Yeah. Well, not quite, but...
Almost. So you have regular salt.
Yes, regular salt.
Any particular sauce or accompaniment?
No, I think just on their own, regular salt is perfect.
Love that. Very simple.
What?
I was waiting for you to make a regular salt comment regular salt's for simple people.
Wow. Well, Leonie implied that it would be evening it up, but I don't think it's anywhere near even, so I'm not...
I don't know. I think I got 2 from last week.
Oh, really?
So that would be 3.
Oh, jeez. I don't know. We've made count it before, and I don't want to make him count it again. He's brought up the tally before. I don't know if he will bother to do it.
Man, I think we should start doing it.
He made Dali draw a pink slug, so I'm very impressed with
that. I was extremely impressive.
I don't know if you watch on YouTube, Leonie, or listen to it, but his editing is It's very much something I enjoy.
I did see the pink slug on YouTube, yes.
It's also interesting that we will force him to do things.
Outside comfort zone.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's right.
yes.
Could you just, would you put a pink slug on top of Braden's head just for a moment?
Thank you.
Thank you. Bing. Okay, so I always like to ask this question, though, about the chips, is that do you have like a particular memory about having hot chips? Because there's always some nice family... A lot of nice family experiences when they've eaten chips or anything, like when you were young? Or?
Yeah. So, really, fish and chips was the go-to when I was growing up. So, certainly ages me. But, fish and chips was the Friday night go-to. So,
Why does that age you, though?
Oh, well, I feel like we've got more choice now.
Oh,
I feel like,
fair.
there was limited choice back then.
It's more like just burgers and fish and chips and that was about it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what's the fish and chip order? Do you get like... potato scallops, or you just fish and chips?
I've changed, so I've gone healthy over the years. So it's always grilled.
Oh, you always went grilled instead of bird.
Yeah. But we used
grilled
to.
can be great too.
Yeah.
There's no bad options there.
Yeah.
Chicken salt is the bad option.
Oh wow.
Okay. Well, let's ask the next question though. Why don't you ask it to yourself?
Okay. So I
Leonie.
became a Christian.
You're just like, Leonie, how did I become a Christian? How did you become a Christian?
Yeah. I was lucky enough to have Christian parents and so involved in church right from the beginning, which was great. And so I actually made a decision to follow God when I was 9. So even though I had sort of known all about God, and been involved in church, and we went to beach mission for holidays, and we did all that sort of stuff. So it's very familiar, but I also knew that it was something personal. And so growing up, I was a really shy, sort of quiet kid, and I actually wanted to be like the popular kids. I just didn't like being me that much. And so it was interesting because the fact that God really loved me and accepted me and had created me the way he had was really, something special and important. And it's like if God was willing to send his son to die for me, then that's something I should respond to. So I made a commitment to follow him at 9 and held off getting baptised till 14. But from 9 years old, I had the relationship. I had my first answer to prayer. When I was scared about approaching the physical education teacher because I wanted to play netball and I hadn't told them in advance, and my mum said, well, you've got to tell the teacher, and I'm going, no. And so, you pray about it, and God made it work, and it was like, oh, God, yeah, okay.
And did you, when you became a Christian at 9, how involved were your parents in that? Because you said they were non-Christian. How much did they have an influence on, like, you understanding what God meant to you and what Jesus had done for you?
Yeah. So they really were influential. So I think my dad was an elder in the local church, was Church of Christ. And so I remember my mum talking about when she became a Christian and my dad. And so... yeah, they used to pray with me, and I was really fortunate to have that sort of strong background.
And do you have like strong memories of them praying with you? And
yeah, I have really strong memories of my dad being the one to sit down at night, in bed and just and do that. I have strong memories of going to Sunday school and just all the stuff that you do. And growing up in youth groups were a big part of what we did too. And
this wasn't in Sydney though, either,
no,
right? No, I do know
in
that
Melbourne.
piece of information. Yeah, so where did you live in Melbourne? And
so Glen Waverley.
I've heard of that.
Yeah, it was the outer suburbs back then. It's not the outer suburbs anymore.
Right, okay.
It's more the equivalent of Chatswood now, probably.
Oh, okay.
But no, it was a good place to grow up. Yeah.
What about school there? What was that like?
Yeah, so the local primary school was great. You could walk to school and it was wonderful. I went to a girls' school for high school, so a Baptist girls' school. That was interesting. I didn't particularly love school. I had a few good friends, but I was probably much more the introvert, so I had a close, small circle of friends. But ironically, I had the friends who were the Christian. So I had another close girlfriend who was a strong Christian. So we were known as sort of the Christians. And then I was
at the Baptist school?
Yeah, at the Baptist school, that's right. And then I was friends with the non-Christians. Like I was friends with the kids that were the rebellious ones, and all the popular ones in between, no.
Really? Yeah. Can you, as someone, like I'm someone that's gone to co-educational schools for my schooling, what's it like being in a girls-only school?
Look, in some ways, it's actually quite easy because you just don't have to navigate a whole lot of different considerations and relationships. You know, honestly, girls' relationships are bad enough to navigate as a teenager anyway.
I'm just not going to say anything about that.
So it sort of allowed you to just concentrate on school. But it was probably why it was really helpful to have youth group as the outlet as well, to be able to form those relationships and have a proper social group. Yeah, growing up.
Just can you spoke about you said you were a little bit shy, but then you also talked about like your friendship groups there. Can you tell us why would you class yourself as being shy but then wanting to be in the popular group? Yeah,
I know. It's really weird, isn't it? Because
it's not weird. I'm just a little bit interested. That's all.
Well, I think for me there was a sense of sometimes not being heard, and that wasn't anyone else's fault, probably other than mine, but perhaps not having the confidence. And the one person who really did hear me all the time was my dad. So, my mum was great, but often it was my dad that really helped me feel heard. And interestingly, as a career practitioner, there's a process of looking at your early childhood heroes. And so I had to think about that. And my dad came up as one, but asked you to think of others. And again, this just timeline, Flipper and Skippy. Okay, well,
two well-known Australian animals.
Australian stuff.
Oh, is Flipper Australian?
No, American.
Okay,
yeah, but animal TV stars in my primary, era.
Well, in everyone's eyes.
But it was interesting because they actually listened. Like they were able to listen to humans and then communicate. And it was like, so this idea of being heard or listening has been important for me. Yeah. And I realised that there's a whole thread really through my life where I like listening to people, where I actually discovered in my uni years that I like public speaking, which who knew?
Well, that's very much in contrast to being shy.
Yeah, but it's about being heard. And
interesting, okay.
I like people to be able to hear other people. So, it's really... Thanks for the question.
No, that's all right. That's really interesting because I feel like I'm a little bit the same, actually. And sometimes I get frustrated when I don't feel like I'm being heard. Where do you think that comes from? Do you think, like... Because, I mean, I probably have my own thoughts, but I don't want to throw my parents under the bus, in a sense, because I love my parents very much, and I don't think they did anything on purpose, if that makes sense. No. But I'm just wondering, why is that just a personality thing? Do you think you got specific parts of your parents' personality? What do you think is the cause of that?
I think it's lots of things. I think it is personality, partly, but I think it's a fundamental human need to be seen in a way, to be acknowledged. And I think that, it plays out differently for different people. And so anything that threatens us being really understood, it's almost like you don't see my potential, or you don't really see all that I am.
Or what I'm thinking.
Or what I'm, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you think that how do you think that relationship to being seen and heard affected your relationship to God? Do you think that?
Yeah, I think that's a really key part of that, because really only God can really see the real you, and only God accepts the real you. Even we don't accept ourselves. So that was the whole bit. I had to learn from God to really accept myself, and the more I realise that my identity is in Him, then I can't reject that identity. It's not. It's super. It's easy to reject yourself, but if your identity is in Christ, then it's like, I can't really do that. That's
cool. That's a cool way to look at it. It's almost like you're being shown that actually God has made you a certain way for a reason, and this is like, stop running away from it almost, right?
Yep.
Is that what you think? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow, I haven't had a thought about that. I think that's a really cool thought.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So you're at high school?
Yep.
What high school did you go to in Melbourne?
Kilvington Girls Grammar.
Kilvington Girls Grammar, of course. Yes, of course. Yes, well known. Yeah. What's it like? You said that your closest friend was a Christian.
Yeah.
But then, you were also friends with the supposedly rebellious crew. How does that play out? I don't think the rebellious crew really jive heaps well with a Christian, or a Christian. A Christian, sorry. There's a question.
Yeah.
How does that work?
I look, in a funny sort of way, I think it's authenticity that they want. So I think there's a sense in which the middle group are almost like a bit of the poser group, or they're just the group that it felt more superficial.
I don't, as long as I'm just fade into the background a little bit, I'm not going to get exposed. Is that what you mean?
No, well, I actually think that they felt listened to and cared for by us as Christians, or certainly me.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, so I meant the kind of so the reason that I was saying was you meant the people kind of in the middle were less authentic because they're kind of just like, if I just don't, if I fit in and not be myself.
Yep, okay. That's exactly right.
Cool. So then the rebellious guys really wanted to feel heard.
Yeah, and I think that they owned their own, their own space, and they were used to people. Well, they were used to the hierarchy, the teachers. The whole system sort of rejecting them. They were trying to rebel against that. Yeah. And so I guess they expected that to provoke a reaction. And if the Christian reaction wasn't the same as the other, like if we were actually interested in them and wanted to be their friends, that was different.
Mm. And did anything prompt you to behave that way with those that group of people? Or just being a Christian? I think it's just being.
I think it's just being open to people.
Yeah. And had you come to that realization you became a Christian at 9, so the Holy Spirit's obviously working for quite a while up until you're into middle high school or later high school. Do you think that along with, you said you were going to youth group, is that kind of what helped you to say, I actually want to intentionally do this at school? Because we've talked about it before, and you may have heard, because you've listened to every episode, how both Braden and I have said that we regret a little bit that we didn't stand out more as Christians at school. And I feel like what you're saying there is you really did stand out at school as a Christian. So I'm just keen to get your thoughts on all that.
Yeah. It wasn't as intentional. It was when I went to uni that it became super intentional. Okay. It was somewhat intentional. I think it was just the logical outworking of a relationship with God.
Yeah.
And so I don't think, I think there was some intentionality, but it wasn't super, intentional. So I don't think I actually invited any of my friends at school, I don't think I actually invited any of them along to youth group or stuff like that in the sense that I was really intentional about trying to do that. But when I got to uni, that really changed things.
Right.
Yeah.
So what was that transition like from high school to uni? Did you know what you wanted to do at university when you finished school? You went to year 12, I'm guessing?
Yeah, I went to year 12. Yes, I thought I would be an educational psychologist. So, going with education, pretty familiar. Psychology, interested. Well, okay, that seems like pretty interesting. So I turned up at Melbourne Uni doing an arts degree, hoping to do a major in or honours in psych, and found myself connecting with a Christian group on campus called Student Life, and just loved it.
Yeah.
It was a whole new world. It was amazing.
And I know that you were on way back a couple of years ago on a Shock Absorber episode with Stu and I, and we're talking about university ministry. And I know that's something that's you're really passionate about.
Yeah.
Why did you enjoy it so much, and why are you still so passionate about it?
Yeah. Well, what I really loved was that it was a group of Christians who were super committed to the Great Commission. So they sort of knew there was a purpose for what they were doing. So they were on campus to basically disciple each other and to share Christ. And because uni time is such an interesting time you're sort of working out, I guess you're confronted with the rest of the world's views. So, if you haven't been already at school, which most people are, but at uni it's like, okay, hang on, you're getting so many different perspectives, and suddenly people actually want to know why you believe what you believe. So it's not enough to just say I'm a Christian. It's like, okay, yeah, why?
And then you get challenged by it.
Yeah. And so it actually forces you to start to think about why that is. And that process was really confirming for me, because it actually made me realise there was actually really good evidence for what I believed. And yes, I believed by faith, but it wasn't blind faith, and that and that I could have an answer to people, and that came through Student Life, through the the training that we did in how to. I guess in apologetics, really. Josh McDowell was really big back then. It was a real sense of being able to be confident in articulating your faith and why you believed, and not being ashamed of it, but also not forcing it on other people, but just going, well, this is it. This is what I believe. This is where I formed my opinions. This is how. You can check it out. This is what you can look at the Bible. You can,
So being challenged helped you to articulate better why you're a Christian.
Absolutely.
Which I'm guessing probably helped deepen your faith as well, because you looked into it more.
Yeah.
And then is that why you're so passionate about university ministry? Because you want others to help others be able to do that thing?
Yeah. And it was definitely a ministry where it was about multiplying disciples. So it wasn't just about can you build yourself up and be the best Christian you want to be, and all the rest, which is great because we all want to keep growing. But it was actually stepping out in faith and growing by following Christ's example. And so we would have discipleship groups, and we would be discipled personally by people and disciple others. And we would see, we would share our faith with people. Just and even, it sounds weird, even random strangers, on the lawn at uni, and you'd get used to.
Did you just go up and talk to them?
Yeah.
So that helped you obviously be more outward in your faith as well.
Yeah. And you learn to, I think, be respectful and interested and curious about people's journeys and stories. And if you start there, that's great. You're not going, it's not your work to do anything, it's just God being at work. And
that's very similar to the people at school as well. You're just doing the same thing. You're just being genuinely interested in and authentic in them because you're a Christian. I was just making that link between those two things. What does it look like being in university ministry? Because another previous Chip Lunch episode, both Braden and I said callbacks. We were just ready to leave uni as quickly as possible, and often it was because we were doing Friday night ministry and stuff like that. So what does that look like for people like ourselves who are uninitiated? And what do you do besides going to classes? What are you doing?
Yeah.
Except hassling people on the lawns.
Yeah, it's hassling people. Yeah. So I think it's for me, it was very much getting involved in that ministry, and my church involvement sort of backed off a little bit. So I think it's not that it's hard to do both, but I think it's some people choose to focus on different aspects. Yeah. So it's like your ministry was focused there, so no wonder you were back there. Yeah. My ministry focus was on campus, and it just suited that way. So. Yeah, it was, and you were ministering in an environment that was growing you and that was supporting you in a community, and I was doing the same there. Yeah. And running small Bible study discipleship groups, meeting one-on-one with my group members, one-on-one with my leader, going to conferences, running evangelistic events sometimes.
And how many days a week were you going to uni?
Yeah, that I was doing an arts degree, so that says it all. What did I have? 14 hours or whatever classes. So I had time.
I didn't want to cast aspersions.
I had time to lay on the lawn. Favourite recollections of but I really literally did have time, and my classes were spread, so I had to be on campus I think every day.
Yeah. Really? So, but only 14 hours?
Yeah. Okay. So I had the spread and, to do that.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I had a question related to that. Oh, what's the curliest, most challenging question you think you got during university ministry, or one that you can remember at least?
Yeah. I don't know that there's any really more challenging ones probably than the emotion-laden ones. So you get people that want to debate things like, the Bible's not true because, how can it be? It's got all these contradictions and what. But I think the hardest ones are the ones where people have had experiences of suffering or experiences of or bad experiences, and those questions are, well, how can God allow this, or I think they're the tricky ones, because there's not an easy answer for lots of stuff. There's lots of good principles, but speaking into someone's pain or whatever, that's hard.
And especially if you don't know them.
Yeah,
as well, when you're meeting them for the first time, like you said, on the lawn.
Yeah.
There's a lot of lawns at Melbourne University.
About the same as Sydney.
Okay, okay. What did you say?
Or just one big one.
Oh, yeah.
On the flip side of that, do you have like a specific memory of something going really well? Like
people even
like a really nice interaction? Or?
Yeah. I think I have memories of sometimes the surprises. Yeah. So I think, I probably go into things, my personality is that I'll look for the risk first, not the positive, So I probably go in thinking, this might not go so well, rather than going and thinking, this will be brilliant, And so I think I was often surprised when people said, yeah, sure, sit down. Yeah, we'll have a chat. Okay.
Well, what's your opening line on that, sorry? Is it just you want to talk about Jesus?
Yeah, well, we changed after a while. It was a little different because that's what you need, is some point of connection. And so at sometimes we had an actual survey that we were doing. So we couldn't just lie and say we're doing a survey. We actually did a survey to try and have that opening to say, look, we belong to a Christian group on campus, so we told people, so they knew sort of where we're coming from. Yeah. And, we're doing this survey. We just have, 4 questions. Could we just ask you quickly, and then we'd ask them a bit about, their spiritual background, or, just very general questions. And then at the end of that, we might say, thanks, that's great. Would you be interested in chatting more about God or about your belief in whatever? And some of them say no, and some of them say, oh yeah, you can sit down.
They're mostly art students. They've had plenty of time on the lawn.
Probably.
Look at this guy. He's in my class. We'll ask him. What about church? You said you stepped back a little bit from church when you're doing a lot of university ministry. What's church like as you finishing school and going to uni at the same time?
Yeah. So we switched to a Baptist church sort of into my high school years, really because it was a bigger church that had more people and more youth activities, and my parents had made friends with some people there, and so that became that. And I was involved in youth group and going to church, but I didn't have a Bible study group as part of that. So in a sense, I was. It was very much weekend. Church was very much weekend, I suppose, and my uni ministry was very much during the week.
When you said involved in youth group, did you go to youth group or you were leading?
No, I was never a youth group leader.
Okay.
Yeah. But I did get to go to youth group. And, youth group was probably a bit different back then than it is now.
Well, you kind of mentioned just before we started that you had an interesting story from youth group. Would you like to tell the tale?
Seamless.
Yeah, what a segue.
Yeah. Yes, youth groups back then, I guess, did a fair bit of entertaining as well. So we had certain nights that would be especially fun nights. And so each year, I was there for 3 years on this. One day each year, they'd have a special blind date night, which sounds just crazy.
It really does.
It sounds crazy. But it was designed really for groups to get together and people who didn't know each other. So it wasn't like you had your own little group that went out and did something. It was like you put your name in if you wanted to be involved. The leaders worked it all out, and I guess they managed ages and managed suitability and tried to manage all the risk elements. I'm thinking of as a warden going, oh my goodness, what are you doing?
Oh, I don't know if we're putting this one in the parish council anytime soon.
Risk management.
But yes, I do remember one particular very memorable night, and I was not anticipating that I would ever really visit Sydney or end up living in Sydney. But this night I was just told I was getting picked up at like 4 o'clock, smart casual. And
hey, well, can I ask, what was, when you say smart casual, what did you choose to wear as smart casual?
Oh, I think I wore jeans. You pretty much always wear jeans in Melbourne because you never know what the weather's like. Those jeans, a nice jumper, something. And it turned out we headed to the airport. And so I'm thinking, oh, wow, the airport's actually quite a long way away from where I live. Are we just going to have dinner? And the idea was we were going to have coffee there, and then we were going to go on to dinner somewhere. And it turned out that rather than being in a group this time, it was actually a one-to-one. Now, I did know the person because we were all part of the same youth group, so there was no issue. I did know the guy. And anyway, we get to the airport, we're having a coffee, sit down, and then suddenly on the table, 2 tickets. And at that stage, you still had paper tickets, so none of this e-tickets back then. And suddenly I went, we're going to Sydney.
For the night. Wondering what the youth group budget was for this.
I was going to say, that's what I was going to say.
Did everyone else get?
Did everyone else get flights to somewhere else?
No. I think this was a unique experience.
So, maybe I should wait till the end. But does that mean that he's paid for the tickets? Or youth group has. So he was. He has. Does that mean that he was quite keen on you, Leonie?
Quite possibly.
Okay. Right. Cool. Moving on. Right. So you flew to Sydney.
So we flew to Sydney. We had dinner at a Chinese restaurant. We had a taxi ride across the bridge. We went back to the airport. Came home. I think I was home by 11:30.
Wow. So how long do you think you were in Sydney for?
Couple of hours, 2.5 hours.
Must have been pretty fun, though.
Yeah. It was pretty amazing. It was pretty amazing.
But I'm guessing that didn't end up.
It didn't go anywhere.
You're like, I like that you can.
A story to tell.
Yeah.
That's what you got.
I feel like he must have just known someone who worked for. Did you fly Qantas or Ansett? I'm guessing Ansett was still there.
I can't even remember. It was probably Ansett.
He knew someone at Ansett.
Yeah, quite possibly.
Chuck us some tickets, bro, so I can take this lovely lady to Sydney.
To a succulent Chinese meal in Sydney. Fly all the way there.
A succulent Chinese meal.
Yes, it was a little bit different from one of the other previous ones. It was a group one where we went spotlighting, if people know, like rabbit. We didn't shoot. We didn't shoot rabbits, but spotlighting for rabbits.
Well, just trying to find rabbits. That was it. So you didn't do...
Yeah, quite different.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
That is very different.
That's so epic.
Yeah. Have you shoot any kind of plans to do something
Oh,
like
well,
that for
now that we've got a tick from Leonie to
the wardens
have a blind date night, who knows what will happen?
Yeah.
No,
I think we've evolved from there.
Yeah, I don't think we're flying anyone to Melbourne.
Or just the kids that you're like, no, you can go. You can,
you can go to
Melbourne. Wow. So that nothing eventuated from that.
No.
But did it start a love affair with Sydney?
Oh.
Well, that is a great suggestion because it has. I moved up to Sydney when I finished my degree. I decided to join Student Life as a staff member.
Okay.
So I switched and did social work because I thought it would be more practical, not because I ever really wanted to work as a social worker. And it was more practical. I got, good counselling skills and all the rest.
Okay.
And so I joined Student Life on staff and they sent me to Sydney, which was fabulous because I got to move out of home. There's a great
Chinese restaurant there.
And yep, absolutely. I've been there before.
Yeah. How old were you? Sorry.
So I was 22.
Sorry. I feel like I talk over the top of him a lot. So, sorry, you were 22?
22.
Yeah. Okay, ask your question, Brad.
So, Student Life, did they send you to a particular university?
Yes, they sent me to Sydney Uni.
The Sydney Uni.
Yeah, so I lived in Newtown before it was trendy.
Awesome. Yeah.
And I lived...
From one lawn to the other.
Yes, it was. Very definitely.
And my mum lives in Newtown now. But what would you said that before Newtown was trendy. What does Newtown look like when it's not trendy?
Well, it can be pretty derelict like place. Some of the places that were pretty, It can also look like we came home one night to have someone just passed out at our front doorstep.
Oh,
so I literally had to step over the person to unlock the door. Yeah. We had a murder in our street one night. So we lived in Australia Street opposite the fire brigade, the police station and the courthouse.
So you would have had a fair bit of noise.
So, but at least we felt sort of safe.
At least you were living with
someone. Didn't have far to go.
Yeah, that's right. So I'm guessing you just walked to campus.
Yeah, walked to campus, walked everywhere.
That's nice.
It was brilliant.
Yeah.
And were you living with friends? Or?
Yeah, so I was living with another. So we had a girl's house and a guy's house. So the guy's house was a couple of streets away. Myself, another staff member, and 2 students in the girl's house. The guy's house had 2 staff members and 4 other students. They had like 6 guys in this ramshackle terrace.
Derelict.
Yeah, derelict.
That's a great word, by the way. And that should be the title of this episode.
Derelict. Wow.
Derelicts. So instead of being a student in Student Life, what does being a staff member Student Life look like?
Yeah. It's great because you're working in community with the staff team and the student leaders as well, and so it's a constant. I guess it's a constant, like you're living ministry all the time. Really, in some ways.
You enjoy that?
Yeah. It was great.
And what you want, was that what you wanted?
Yeah, it was really, really good. I loved it because you've developed really deep relationships with those you worked with. So I love working closely with people. I love feeling part of a team. And you know what it's like to in youth ministry to have those relationships. It's great to be ministering together.
Ministering as friends.
It's really, really good.
Sense. And what's like we asked you a story about what was a really fun story from Melbourne Uni, but what about Sydney Uni when you were working on stuff? Do you have anything else that you remember from that?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I do remember this.
Excellent. You've got a smile on your face, so it's going to be a good one.
I shouldn't forget it anyway.
Someone tried to fly me to the Americas.
We had a very big outreach happening, and some, I can't remember all the details, but some American I don't know, it might have been a movie or something happening, and we had a lot of outreach happening around it. And I'd been in Sydney for only about 3 months or so. Maybe slightly more than that, maybe 4 or 5 months. But I remember I had formed a pretty quick relationship, which I think my mum was just adamant that was her biggest fear, that I'd go to Sydney and I wouldn't come back to Melbourne. And so very quickly I found that I formed a good friendship with one of the student leaders, one of the guys. And so I remember on this outreach we had this whole night of doing this stuff, and then we were off to get pizza or whatever, and it was like, okay, so when are you going to ask me? And it was like, because we talked about getting married, and it was like,
wow.
we decided to get engaged. So I'd moved up to Sydney, and pretty much 4 months later I was engaged.
Wow.
Hi, Mum. The thing you least wanted to happen has now happened.
That's right.
Right.
I'm staying.
Does that because I was going to see if this ties in with this question of how did you find a church? Like, if you moved to Sydney, you obviously got to find a church too.
Yeah.
What was the process of that? And then I'm guessing this was part of the process.
Yeah,
as
this
well.
was really part of the process, because there wasn't really necessarily a church to connect with. So yeah, I got involved with my fiance's church. He was originally from the Blue Mountains, but living down in Sydney. And 10 months later we got married, and then on staff we moved up to the Blue Mountains for a short while, for 6 months, commuting before we moved back to sort of Hurstville and got more involved in a church down there.
Oh, okay. So you weren't really involved in church prior to that? Oh, okay. Just because it was hard to get connected. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
right. And so the Blue Mountains, you're moving a lot, if you hadn't realised that,
Yeah.
Leonie. I was about to call you Anthony. That's not very good. Sorry.
We'll get
Leonie.
Eck to put up the map.
Yes,
Melbourne
Melbourne to Sydney.
Melbourne,
Newtown.
Sydney.
Yeah, Newtown. Yep.
Newtown, now Newtown to...
Well, Newtown, and then literally just another suburb away. So I had to move in between that, and then Blue Mountains, and then Hurstville, and then Connells Point.
Oh, wow.
And then United States, and then
I didn't
This
even
is
know
good.
this part of the story.
This is
Okay.
good. This is like where she's plotting out the rest of the podcast for us. That's great. Okay, hang on. So Blue Mountains, where in the Blue Mountains did you move to?
Blaxland.
Blaxland.
Yeah.
But you were only there for a few
Yeah,
months?
only 6 months.
Okay,
Yeah.
6 months, sorry. And then, but that was still part of student life?
Yeah, we were still on staff. We just, yep.
What universities are up there? University of
No,
Western
we were
Sydney?
commuting to Sydney.
Oh,
Really?
wow.
So it's just a long train
okay.
trip.
Oh.
Yeah, very long train trip.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're still doing that. Okay, then you moved back to Hurstville.
Yeah.
What was the...
Shorter train trip.
Yeah, shorter train trip to the city.
Shorter train trip, yeah.
What
We were
was-
also doing some work at Uni of New South Wales
Yeah.
at that time too. So we were split between Sydney
Building
and
up your
New South
roster
Wales. Yeah.
of universities. Okay, so why did you move to Hurstville?
I just think it was to connect back in closer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think there may have been some other staff around that area too,
Okay.
which was illogical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're working in student life, now working at University of Sydney
Yeah.
and also University of New South Wales.
Yeah.
So when does America come into the picture?
Oh, that is a bit later.
Oh, okay.
That is actually
So what's
8 years
happening
later. Yeah.
now? What's happening as you're in Hurstville?
Okay. Well, we, through a contact, and God is good in providing, provided us a house to live in Connells Point for a very reasonable rent.
Very
and so
nice.
we had like 5 years of that, and God was so good. And we got involved in a Brethren church then, because that was my husband, his father was a lay preacher, the Brethren church, so we got involved in the local church there, which was great, and we had Bible studies and whatever, great church. And then we moved, again, another Christian providing rent, but we ended up moving across the bridge into Caringbah. And so now really joined.
Yeah, thanks for coming across the bridge. You know, people say that. Like Southern Shire people, come on, guys. Right, so a lot of moving around.
Yeah.
And then still working in student life?
Still working in student life. My role changed a bit because we ended up having 2 kids.
Oh, of course.
So that changed things a little.
Yep.
Yeah. So son Michael and a daughter Catherine. And so I was on campus just 1 day a week while my husband Andrew looked after them. But most of the time I was sort of home looking after them. They got used to coming to camps, so they would just come everywhere with us, including projects overseas. So Michael at 18 months came to Fiji for 6 weeks with us on a summer project, and we lived with a family who also had an 18-month-old little girl.
That's cool.
Who used to bite.
You or...
No, used to bite him. Very interesting.
Yep.
And he also managed to fall out of a minibus and land on his head during that trip as well. So that was a little
Was the minibus moving?
No.
Okay, thank goodness. So he fell out a window?
That.
No. Just getting off the steps.
Okay.
So
that's all
not
right.
so
I was worried he's
dramatic.
fallen
No,
out of a window.
No.
Okay, that's good.
But yes. So, and then we went to New Zealand a few years later on another summer project and left him behind and took our sort of 2-year-old daughter with us. So, they got to come and do some of the stuff with us.
And that willingness to travel, is that something that you wanted to do? Because you travelled a little bit in Australia, but now you're also going to Fiji, America later, as we talked about, but also New Zealand. Was that something that you wanted to do?
It was a logical part of ministry. So those overseas projects were a bit like what the Year 13 project does, was just a way of continuing to serve. And I don't think we had any real, aspirations to travel. I don't think there was anything really like that. It was just, no, we just want to do this. This is a logical part. And we would have teams of American students come on their summer projects to us and come out on campus with us. And I remember going out to Broken Hill with them doing some work. And so we would welcome them. And it was just what we did.
A question we normally like to ask parents who come on the podcast. Joel normally likes asking this question, but I'll steal it off him. What do you think God taught you through being a parent and having kids?
And still is probably teaching.
I always struggle when I hear that question, because I sort of go, I don't know. But I think what I reflect on is whether at whatever stage for me in my life, God has always been the most important relationship, and has always just guided and dictated everything I do and the way I live. And so parenting is just it's just another piece of that. And so it's almost like I feel like I just approached parenting, and fairly young, but we just approached parenting like just living a Christian life, just following God, just taking as it comes, doing what we can do. And we certainly made decisions to help our children understand and know God in ways. So, playing all the fabulous children's Christian, they would have been tapes back then on our trips back and forwards to visit family in Melbourne, and and singing the songs with them and reading the stories, and so
There must have been a few car trips then. If your family's in Melbourne, was Andrew's family from
Sydney?
Blue Mountains?
Yeah, Blue Mountains.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So you've been doing a fair bit of travelling in the car.
Yeah. His mum and dad moved to Campbelltown to work with a particular church there.
Well, that's a bit easier.
So that was a tad easier.
Okay. I mean, I think that one thing that I always think about being a parent is it teaches you to be less selfish. Do you think that? Would you agree with that?
Oh, yeah. It really does, because it highlights the choice between selfish or not.
Yeah.
And so you can make that choice. And I think, yeah, that's very clear. We, sometimes we were very selfish in the sense of we're very involved in triathlon, and we made our kids our kids fitted in with us.
Swim a triathlon. Participate in the triathlon.
So they, from babies, they got used to just coming along to, and there were certain things that we couldn't, whilst we got them involved in lots of sports, and I do remember the 2 years that I was involved in little athletics as a parent. For those parents that know what little athletics means, it's a bigger commitment.
Compared to triathlons, you mean?
Well, yeah, to spend a whole Saturday morning helping out with your kids was a bigger.
Yeah. So what does that look like? Because you're helping with timing or marking how far it's through the discus or anything
all of
like
that. All of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that has to go all morning.
Yeah.
From when?
Oh yeah,
until
from like 8 o'clock through to 12 o'clock or whatever.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. That's why I'm not going to allow my children to play cricket, for example, because it goes all day. And I'll probably get called up to umpire, and can't do that.
But I think the interesting thing is, as a parent, is you don't see things as sacrifices for them. You see things as what you want as opportunities for them.
Yeah,
and so we actually changed churches for our kids when they were older. So we were at Caringbah at St Phil's for a little while, and again, it was good for our kids at that age. But my son then decided to go to the Kingsway Church when it was the Kingsway Church, and my daughter came to Gymea Anglican. So for a while we sort of had a 3-church family until we moved to Gymea as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
You said that you were very committed to triathlon.
Yeah.
Tell us more about that.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of not a fan of long distance.
Yeah.
Or anything. I'm very much a sprinter, whether it's swimming or running.
Yes.
What was the appeal of triathlon to you and Andrew? I'm guessing you both do it.
Yeah. So he got involved first. Was studying PE teaching, and triathlon was just starting out. This was the 80s, so triathlon was still sort of in its infancy to a degree, and he really liked the idea of the challenge and pushing himself and all the rest, and I was very motivated not to miss out.
Why was that?
Oh, because always I have not wanted to miss out.
Okay.
So
you had a fair bit of FOMO.
Yeah. And also our friends, we got involved with the local triathlon club, and there were some people at uni sort of. So it was, I didn't want to sit just on the sidelines and watch. I wasn't happy to do that. So
that's because it's a long time.
Yeah.
And they probably disappear for a long time, right?
Oh, I've sat on the sidelines and watched an awful lot because we got into endurance triathlons. We're talking really.
Let's break that first of all. Like, what's a normal triathlon? That's swim first, isn't it?
Swim.
How far is that?
Well, a small one would be 500 metre swim.
Okay.
Probably something like a 15k or 20k ride.
Yes, on the
and
bike.
something like a 5k run.
Okay.
That's a little one.
What's the Olympic one? That's 1.8.
1.5k swim.
Okay, thank you.
40k ride.
Yep.
10k run.
Yep. Okay.
Okay. Then you've got your long course.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So you're looking at like a 2k swim.
Yep.
80k ride. 20k run. We did that in Canberra a fair bit. Yeah. And then you're looking at half Ironman, which is just slightly longer. That's like a 90 ride and a 25 run. And then you're looking at Ironman, which is 3.8. 180 on the bike.
And isn't it a marathon?
And a 42.
Yeah, it's a marathon run as well.
Marathon at the end.
And then you're looking
ridiculous.
at ultra endurance.
Yeah,
which is
more.
Which is the Hawaiian Ultraman. So not the Ironman, Ultraman. And you're looking at 10k swim, followed by something like, I can't remember the exact distance, then get off the bike, followed by something like about 100k ride. And then the next day, so it's one day, and you've got to fit it in 12 hours, so otherwise you're out.
Oh, I have heard that, yep.
And then the next day is a hugely long ride, so something like 270k ride up a mountain. And then the last day is double marathon.
Double marathon.
And just the icing on the cake is a double marathon. And have you done that?
My ex-husband has.
Really?
And so this was our last family holiday together. And we went to Hawaii. So he's done the Hawaiian Ironman, which is amazing. And we went without the kids. And then a couple of years later, did the Ultraman. You sort of have to get invited to do it. There are only 10 competitors.
Oh, wow.
And it's
10?
from around the world. Yeah, well,
Wow.
it's pretty crazy. And and you bring your support team, which was us. And we didn't have a lot of money at that stage. I think we stayed in one hotel room. So I think the kids slept on the floor, as you do.
Good prep for the race
Yeah,
too.
And no one. I was the only driver. So my son was probably about 16 and daughter 13, but didn't have a license, so I couldn't drive. So when Andrew was competing, I was the only one that could drive. Now, mostly that was fine until the last day, the double marathon, and you have the plan worked out. And he did amazingly well. I think he came 5th halfway through in the end. He did amazingly well. But on the last day, you have a plan as to what sort of time you think you're going to do and all the rest. Well, it didn't quite go to plan, and it started to get really slow. And so we'd run with him. The kids would run with him for a bit, and I would run with him.
That's cool.
Then I'd have to run back to the car and get in the car and drive up and run back.
Wow. So did you end up doing a marathon? He's doing a double one.
I ended up doing an Ironman and a marathon.
Right.
Yeah. So
That's cool.
I mean, it's not the craziest thing that he's done either. So he's got a silver medal for the 100k run in Australia.
Wow.
Yeah.
100k run.
So supporting all of it's been really a really interesting.
Can you confirm this rumour for me that I've heard that marathon runners, their toenails fall off?
Quite possibly.
Because they do so much running. I'm just wondering if you have you had that experience? Or your toenails have stayed intact?
Mine have stayed intact.
Okay.
But,
okay. So maybe it just depends on how much calcium
depends.
you've had or something
yes.
related to you. Is that calcium? Is that related to your fingernails or is that your bone? That's your bone.
No idea.
Let's I'm going out here.
Smart anyway.
Sorry, going off track.
Yeah, I sound smart anyway. Well, let's say I'm not a doctor, but calcium is good for your fingernails. Right. Well, I was busy trying to Google the Hawaiian Ironman, but then the internet wasn't working, so that was disappointing. I've got one more question about triathlon / Ironman. How do you end up training for something that is so long? Like, it's not like you can fit in a couple of Ironmans before you do the Ironman.
No,
right?
no.
Okay.
That's a really smart question.
And is it about periodization?
It is.
Yes. Please educate us more. That's all I know. I'm not a doctor.
It is. No. So you do want to prepare your body for what it's going to go through. So you do want to have some long and slower or longer training sessions because and it's not so much it's almost the length of time rather than the amount of miles because you want your body to be familiar with running for like 3 hours or 4 hours. You don't want to have only run for an hour and then suddenly your body's got to run for 3 or 4. It's just not used to that. But most of your training is pretty much in the middle range of getting really fit, but not too much to get injured. And then there's some that's the really the interval training that's about building speed. But for someone like me that didn't care about speed and that just wanted to finish, and that it wouldn't have mattered how much training I did, I wouldn't have got much better. So it was just about doing enough. And I was just on the verge of injury, so I hadn't actually ridden the 180 before. The longest I'd ridden was 150. Wow. So that last 30 in the race hurts.
That last 30
Last
kilometres.
30 kilometres. On a bike, I suppose you're at the end. You're at the end of the ride, but you are moving a bit quicker on the bike.
Yeah.
So, like 30 kilometres is maybe
get you to
slightly
ride
more achievable
180,
rather than a run. Like that
Yeah.
last 30 kilometres on the run. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah. And the run training would have been, I wouldn't have run a marathon before. I would have run like a 30, 32, 35K run at the most. Yeah.
how do you fit in training like that?
Yeah. Yeah.
With
So that, yeah.
being like obviously being a mum and
Yeah,
working
yeah,
all that
yeah.
stuff.
And
Like, how
both
do you
of
fit
you
that in?
wanting to train that way.
Yeah, exactly.
And how do you fit two parents doing it?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what I was
So
thinking.
we had an
Yeah.
agreement that when, because my husband, Andrew's done more than 17 Ironmans in different countries. So the first one was in the States. But we had an agreement that when I did one, because that was my goal to do it before I was 40, I just made it a year inside. And when I did it, he wouldn't. No, it didn't work out that way. So we were both training
Yeah.
for it.
Wow.
But it also was really nice because it meant we both got to compete, and I got to run a little bit of the course with him because he was a lap ahead. So
That's still cool,
that was
isn't it?
that
Yeah.
was nice.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Now, if it was in the 80s when you first got on a triathlon, a lot of fluoro?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. What's your favourite fluoro colour?
Well, really, the lime is my
Yeah.
favourite.
Ooh, I
I
like
have to
lime.
say.
Mm.
But and particularly in the US, because we went over at that time, it was just everywhere. The orange and the pink.
Yeah.
The pink was the one I
The
was
pink was the
thinking of,
yeah.
Mm.
And you even had the fluoro zinc.
Oh. Wow.
Like big, those big sunglasses too, big boles. Is that
Yeah, that was interesting. So yeah, it was a very interesting time in fashion.
Expensive sport too, right? You've
It's
gotta
a very
you got to have a
expensive sport.
bike. Oh, I suppose
Yeah.
the bike is going to be the most expensive thing, but
Yeah.
you've got to.
I know.
You've got to have good
expensive.
shoes.
Yep.
Gotta-
You wear the shoes out. If you're doing endurance training, you wear them out.
Wow.
If it's not your toenails, it's your shoes.
Yeah.
That's intense.
Yeah. Very expensive sport,
Yeah.
but incredibly fun.
Yeah.
Like incredibly fun in the sense of challenging. You get to challenge yourself, and it was I just enjoyed the mental challenge of seeing myself do something I never thought I could do, and I found that I actually liked it. So rather than just doing it to keep pushing myself, I would have got sick of that. I actually learned to like a fair bit of it.
I was going to ask you, is there any parallels between your enjoyment of triathlon and your faith?
I think obviously you can make the biblical metaphors where they're talking about running the race, but I think it is about again involving God in every aspect of your life. And it was like, well, God, I can trust you to help me do this. This is something I'd like to do. Don't know if I can. Got to run. I hated running. Got to learn to swim. Got to learn to ride a bike.
At least you like
all
two
that
of
was-
them.
Yeah.
And all of that, had to learn to ride a bike as an adult because I'd never really ridden one much as a kid.
Okay.
And so, practicing around the schoolyards before I get clobbered on the road. So
Wow.
a lot of that took dependence
Yeah.
on God to say, what am I doing? But will you, can I trust you in this? Yeah.
Wow.
I'm not planning to do a triathlon anytime
No,
soon.
no.
But what I was going to ask you is this the right time to talk about going to America? Like, how did that come about?
Yeah. So we enjoyed working with uni students, but we were getting more and more involved in triathlon in a local club, and and wanted to get involved in a sort of an outreach ministry, and we were connecting with local Christian triathletes
Wow.
too. And we had realised that the parent organisation that we were a part of was called Campus Crusade for Christ. It's called Crew now, and it's an international organisation. It's huge.
Yeah.
It's huge. Founded by Dr. Bill Bright, who in the States is really, really well known, almost like Billy Graham status. And so they had a worldwide ministry called Athletes in Action, and we decided that we would go over and get trained, spend 6 months over there, and then come back and bring that ministry back here.
Whereabouts in the States was it?
So we spent 3 months in Athens, Georgia, which is about an hour out of Atlanta.
Yeah.
And that was working on a university campus and getting stuck into stuff. And before that, we went on a summer project with them, which was in Fort Collins, Colorado, which is amazing.
Yeah.
I love Colorado. Colorado. And then we took a holiday in between the summer project and to make it down to Georgia, and we had already made friends with a number of Americans who'd come over. So we bought a car, we flew to Chicago, stayed with a friend, and then we drove. We drove up to Minneapolis, stayed, then we drove across to San Francisco, did the Ironman triathlon there, drove all the way, and that's a whole other story, drove all the way down through the States and stopped with people along the way in LA, dipped into Mexico just to say we'd crossed the border.
Just to say hi?
Yeah.
Hola, sorry.
Went through right round the bottom, came up and ended up in Athens, Georgia.
Wow.
So in 3 weeks we had a station wagon filled with all our worldly belongings, including 2 bikes. Because you buy bikes over there much cheaper to buy bikes over there, and 2 kids,
Yeah,
and the kids were squeezed in like
stupid, like the pedals in their face,
and a car that broke down a couple of times, and staying in the cheap motels along the way. Awesome. Yeah, very interesting.
But it sounds like you really enjoyed that.
Yeah,
Is that true?
It was brilliant. Yeah. I mean, there were plenty of times where it really caused us to depend on God, and not knowing how much money we would have and relying on that. But all of that, I feel privileged to be almost forced into those times to depend, because you grow so much more. And it was wonderful. It wasn't easy, but it was wonderful.
And so you came back here. Is it kind of like sports chaplaincy?
Yeah, it was more of a targeted approach to bringing teams out and running evangelistic events. So we brought some gridiron guys out, and they ran some coaching clinics with the local team, and then you might have a bit of a gospel presentation or something, and you connect people up. So then just one-on-one discipleship. But yeah, sports chaplaincy was happening around the same time.
Yeah, as a similar kind of thing.
Yeah.
Again, just like we did with a couple of other things, what's your... I mean, the story about travelling around America in 3 weeks was pretty cool, but what's, in terms of doing that kind of thing around triathlon and other things, what's the best story that you think you can give us from that time?
It depends what you mean by best in which ways.
What's the most memorable one?
Most memorable. Okay. And pull me on time, because I'll get carried away. Honestly, the most memorable was a fundraiser that my husband did, and he was very taken with. There was a burns charity, and there was a group that were fundraising and doing. They'd done some triathlons, and they'd sort of done the road to Ironman, and so they'd gone from Ballarat, and they'd been journeying along and doing clinics and things, and it was a whole team. And he was really captured by, I think, just a great cause and a great challenge, and so decided to do that. And so I went along as the support person. He had a masseuse as a support person, and there was a team doctor, and there was a bigger crew. But he decided that he would do, I can't remember if it was five Ironmans along the way. So an Ironman each day along the way from Ballarat to Foster.
Madman.
Yeah, to Foster, and then a day off, and then do the Foster Ironman.
Wow.
And that was a really interesting time.
Yeah.
So that was cut the front out of your shoes, because you were getting so many blisters. That was going to Wollongong, nearly being pulled out of it, because having bloods taken all the time to see what was happening,
Yeah.
and about 3 days in, working out that it wasn't looking good, kidney function wasn't great.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. Like, surely your body's like, this is enough.
Yeah. But adamant that I reckon I've passed the worst. Adamant that I think, and so my job was to get at Wollongong. We were up at Wollongong to get the bloods to the hospital, get them analysed, get back, and it was past the worst. So we kept going, and got better. It was an amazing trip. But I was constantly amazed at how what the body can do, what the mind can do.
Yeah.
But also the challenges of just finding things that to keep eating. Because you get tired, you have your whole plan, but then the plan goes out.
Yeah.
Okay, well, what can you have now? What will your stomach now? What will happen? So it's the constant logistics of all of that along the way, and getting to a motel with not enough time to get dinner. Like, you finish the day at 9, all the restaurants are closed.
Yeah.
Then it's time for massage, and it's time for bed, and then at 6 you're up in the morning starting all over again. So, yeah.
Wow.
So that was memorable.
So wild.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've talked about Andrew a lot, and he's obviously a really extremely important part of your life.
Yeah.
But you also mentioned he's your ex-husband now. What can you tell us about that without making too big a deal about it? But I think it's an important thing to talk about.
Yeah. So, yes, I feel really, again, very fortunate. God has been very gracious. Married for 22 years, and really, just a time where I think a lot of people identify that people's values change and people grow apart. And, the best efforts of trying to hold a relationship, sometimes it just doesn't work. And sometimes you have to face the reality that it's actually better to separate and be apart. So that was very amicable. We're fortunate that our son was off at uni, so he had sort of established a bit more of his own life. Daughter doing HSC, which probably wasn't the best for her. But it's not easy for any family. And I think I regret not anticipating how much, even as adults, it has an impact on children. Because they weren't children, they were nearly adults, but it has a huge...
They still are your children.
It's still, and so I think it's it's interesting. But again, God gets you through that. So, I feel very supported through all of that process. Not easy. Certainly I wouldn't say it's easy. And I think actually even emotionally, I really shut down for a couple of years. Almost, I think it's probably self-protection. And it's almost like you stop feeling. And it was like...
Almost like a grieving process? Is that
I think it is.
Yeah,
I think it is. And you just it's almost like you've lost touch with the feelings component. And you know that they're sort of there somewhere. But things change, time changes things. We are still in touch now. We share 2 gorgeous grandchildren.
That's cool.
And so it's lovely to be able to do that. It's great that we all still can share sort of that family time even though we're not together, we still have our separate relationships with the kids, which is brilliant. Yeah.
Well, thank you for being authentic and honest about it. That's really cool. We are probably coming towards the end of the podcast. But as you know, there's just before I asked that final question that you asked, I just wanted to ask you about coming to Gymea Anglican and then coming to Soul Revival Church. What was your thought process around that, and where you think God led you in terms of that? Yeah,
I definitely feel like God was leading in that, because if Catherine hadn't come to the youth group, I might not have gotten connected, but I got connected into Bev Crawshaw's Bible study, so that makes a difference.
Thank you, Bev. Shout out to you.
Wonderful. So, and it meant that we were able, Andrew and I were still able to go to the 5 o'clock service when there was a 5 o'clock service at Gymea. I kept going. He he didn't. And so I kept I was going to Bible study, I kept going to church, and then to the 7 o'clock service. And I think I even went to Week Away one year when I really didn't know too many people, just to sort of feel part of it. And I think I went like for 3 days just to experience it and feel part of it.
A taster.
A taster, yeah. But I knew that I wanted to stay involved. And then when there was the opportunity with Soul Revival starting, I was keen to come on board as soon as it was possible to do that. So it's been wonderful to be part of that. And shout out to Stu for really recognising and encouraging me to contribute and to do things and to say, hey, you're valued here, you've got things to offer. And that's, I think he does that super well for everyone, to encourage you to feel able to express your gifts in whatever way they are.
I definitely agree with that. One of the ways you express your gifts is as a warden. Can you give us a quick lowdown if anyone has ever wanted to be a warden? I'm thinking of Daniel Darvell. What's it like being a warden at a church? Because we have a slightly different setup, I think, to some other Anglican churches that they usually only have one warden, but we actually have 3.
Oh, I think that they usually have a small group of wardens.
Correct me if I am wrong.
Yeah, but we have those elected representatives. So I started as an elected representative. So we have a bit more of that larger group. Well, really, I have to pay credit to the other 2 wardens in terms of Hayden and Adam. They do the heavy lifting. They really, really do. I think I just provide an alternate perspective sometimes on things.
Those are quite important.
Add to the discussion. It's super important to have a group of people that are going to focus on the administrative aspects of a church and make sure that frees up to some degree other people to do other ministry. So someone has to be thinking about the building aspect, the finance aspect, the risk aspect, or some of that stuff. And so the wardens get to really, keep track of what's going in that space. And what I love is that we work as a leadership team with Stu and with the broader Soul Revival Council, with the leaders of the service teams, the central coordinators, the pastors. Super helpful to be part of that.
I think it's definitely also I think that's noticeable, working as a team. Like, it isn't, you know how they kind of talk about organisations with a board and a CEO and one's at odds with the other. I don't see that as working as a church, but it's also good to keep the senior pastor and other pastors accountable through, what would you call it, a separate kind of governance section of the church, and I think that's really important. And I think you guys do a really good job.
Well, the wardens support the ministry, so we support by looking at those aspects, and we leave the ministry aspects and the accountability around ministry to the structures of the Anglican Church. But we can support in that way.
That's great. Before we wrap up the chips, last question. We haven't even really talked about what you do currently as a job now, so I do apologise for that.
Fine, just leaving room for part 2.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, maybe we will leave it for part 2.
We can bring Leonie back.
Yeah, that's right. What do you wish you knew as a younger Christian that you do know now?
Yeah, I think it is the reminder that you can always trust God. It doesn't matter what happens. There's never going to be anything that you can't trust God with. So life's not going to get, there's never going to be anything that God won't be capable of handling for you. And that God's going to do so much more than you can imagine. Yeah. He's going to change you in ways you can't imagine. He's just, and you don't really have to do anything but follow him. Just have to be obedient. You just have to do it day by day, and he'll take care of the rest.
Yeah, that's really cool. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast. Braden, do you want to say any final words before I finish it up?
I always enjoy when I I know Leonie, but I don't know a lot about her
Yeah.
history. So I think it's always really fun to get to unravel your life.
Yeah, which
like
we
the
also
chips.
miss some parts.
Yeah,
of it.
well, we've got plenty. We've got plenty to go.
Yeah.
You got to leave room for a part 2, especially if Chris gets 3. Leonie should get at least 2.
Yeah, she's a warden. That's right.
exactly.
Yeah, that's right. Well, yeah, I think you're right, and I think like this is why we do the podcast, is to hear other people's stories, and hopefully people also bounce off that, identify different things.
Like, I can't imagine another time where I'll get an hour to sit down with Leonie and talk
Yeah,
about her
chat,
life. Like,
Yeah.
it's lovely.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I've like really enjoyed doing this podcast today, because I was just thinking, just how many times that you actually challenge yourself, which is really interesting in contrast to how you said you grew up with being a little bit shy and reserved, and then becoming a Christian and then learning to trust God. But then, like, I just wrote down a few things here. Like, you love being challenged because you like do triathlons. Never done triathlons before. Learned to ride a bike, for example. University ministry, like you liked people challenging you and making you better at being a Christian and explaining why you're a Christian. The 3-week trip around the US where you just bought a car and said, let's go. Even when you speaking about your divorce in such an honest and authentic way, like, and then also just choosing to be a warden. Like, they're all new things, and I think that's really a great encouragement to us, because you're saying that, like, take on the challenges, because that will teach you to trust God even further. And I feel like that's what I've got most out of this podcast with you today, is that you are wanting to be challenged, but it's almost for His glory. And I think about also the times that you said that you really like public speaking because you enjoyed being heard, but I always appreciate how often and willing you are to pray out loud in our gatherings, or like even at council meetings and stuff like that. And now I realise why that is, but also you're challenging yourself again, because I don't really like praying in a large group, but I think by you doing that, it shows that it's possible, and it's also showing just faith in God. So yeah, they're the two things that I really picked up from here.
Thanks.
So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
It's been really lovely. And the time has just flown by, but we're at 1 hour and 15 minutes. So, so thank you very much for your time. We're happy to wrap up the chips, but we always like to finish with a one-way. So thank you very much to you, Leonie. Thank you very much to everyone who's listening or watching. And as always, we finish with a one-way.